appreciate you all being here this afternoon. We've got a very interesting panel. Avoiding network interruptions, hacking, and DDoS attacks. How do we protect all this stuff that's hosted on our networks? That's what we're trying to figure out. We've got a great panel that's going to help us figure out answers to those questions. I'm going to bring them out one by one so each of them can get a round of applause from you guys. So the first one that I'd like to call out to the stage is Ashley Stephenson, the CEO at Corero. Give him a warm round of applause. Head to the end there.
Thank you, Chris.
Next, Jens-Philipp Jung, CEO at Link 11. How are you doing? Very good. Thank you. Next up is William Bell, the VP of Product Development at PhoenixNAP. And finally, is Igor Seletskiy, CEO at CloudLinux. Thanks, Igor. Next thing I want to tell you guys about before we start is this, the catch box. I'm really hoping that I don't have the only questions up here on this stage, that somebody out there in the audience is going to raise their hand at some point. I have this thing. I'm going to throw it at you when you raise your hand. You catch it. You speak right into the top. This is a microphone, and you can be a part of this discussion. I'm really hoping that you will be a part of this discussion. It'll be waiting right here next to me, and I'll be looking for the hands. Great.
Is my mic working? Yeah. So actually, there is a lot of light coming our way. We cannot see your faces, so don't be shy. Go ahead with questions.
Oh yeah, if you want to actually go out there and say me, feel free to do it. So thank you all for being here right now. We were just talking a moment ago about whether it actually is more dangerous out there right now, or whether it just seems like it. And I would love to hear from each of you as to which is true. And if you could put it a little bit in the context of sort of who you are and what you do, that'd be sort of helpful. So hey, I'm so-and-so, and I think it is or is not more dangerous because.
Sure. So my name is Igor Seletskiy. I've been in this industry since '97, working mostly with shared providers, but we're slowly moving into dedicated VPS. We provide software for them. And yeah, if you take 20 years ago, it's much, much more dangerous. Even if you take 5 years before, we do see much more attacks against specifically service provider industry. We see a lot of botnets, and mostly botnets attacking service providers. The attacks are not getting significantly more sophisticated, but the attackers are trying to hide who they are much better. So yeah, it is more dangerous, but I think we can withstand that.
Hi, I'm Ashley Stephenson from Corero Network Security. I also have been in the internet industry for a couple of decades now, and the company I'm with now focuses on DDoS protection. And it's most certainly the case over the last few years that we've seen an increase in the frequency of attacks, the magnitude of attacks, the complexity of attacks. And at the same time, because your businesses are growing, we've seen an increase in the number of potential targets and the bandwidth with which you're connecting them to the internet. So on any kind of chart, it's up and up on the axes in terms of the number of potential targets, the number of attackers, and then also the ease with which you can launch malicious DDoS attacks today has greatly simplified over and got cheaper over the recent years. So definitely an increasing problem.
Great.
Hi, my name is Jens-Philipp Jung. I'm CEO of Link 11. We are protecting companies around the world against DDoS attacks and fighting over several 10,000 attacks last year, reaching from 10 gigabit up to several hundred gigabits. Well, what we see in a more digitally world, so more connected devices, stuff like that, there are also new threats and more devices which can be used by hackers to attack companies. I mean, imagine something like Mirai botnet that couldn't be possible 5 years ago. And if you look about what the analysts say, for example, like Gartner and something like that, they are thinking about that there will be over 5 billion connected devices in 2017 and 50 billion by 2020. So a huge, huge potential of new threats are coming there to companies which can be hacked. And well, we see that this is definitely a risk, a serious risk.
Makes sense.
Hi, my name is William Bell. I'm the Vice President of Products for PhoenixNAP. I do apologize, I'm losing my voice, so just have to bear with me. We're a global IT infrastructure as a service company, and we're helping businesses every day, effectively provide the bare bones scale-out infrastructure, both enterprises and hosting companies. And so a lot of times we're not focused so much on the hacking side, right? But we are seeing significant increases on the network security components, right? The DDoS side is getting crazy. But I think to some of what Ashley said, we're not seeing it. We're not seeing it algorithmically or logarithmically increasing, right? In terms of we truly believe that we're keeping up with capacity. Mm-hmm. Right, against the increase in size of attacks, right, versus, now we are service providers, right, but maybe not the end user, right, maybe they have a couple servers with 1 gig connections and they're toast if they don't have somebody like Ashley or Jens. So, let's go.
Before we get into what we do about all this, I really want to get into the minds of the people that we're ultimately talking about trying to prevent our networks from. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about why somebody would hack and attack our network, or basically who these people are. What do we know about that?
So I was preparing for another presentation here. It's been yesterday, but we actually went to Black Hat community and tried to price things out, and it was extremely interesting. So typical hosting server, typical server is not worth much for the hackers. They would pay anywhere from $2 to $30 for full access to cPanel or Plesk server. They'll pay around $20 for SSH server root access. They pay anywhere like from 50 cents to $2 for access, administrative access to 500 WordPress or Joomla sites. So they're not making lots of money from each individual servers, but that's why they're hacking thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of those servers in a row, and that's why most of the attacks are botnets. We also looked up the DDoS pricing, meaning how much does it cost to actually DDoS someone's site. It was interesting that the prices range from anywhere like $40 to $160 per server per day, so per site per day. So you can hack your friend for basically $100. I'm sure that if they're running protection from some of those guys, it will be much more expensive. But it seems like it's not outrageous amount of money to bring down pretty much any resources they. I'm sure other folks can tell you more about the pricing it takes to generate few gigabits per second of traffic. So please.
I'm definitely interested in that, but let me just make sure that I understand sort of the dynamics. So basically you have the hacker who is going to be paid by somebody who for some reason wants to bring down or attack a
Well, not in the hosting industry, not in the service provider industry. So if we're talking about high-end e-commerce sites, you will see that 99% of the attacks are just against that e-commerce site. But once it comes for service providers, they're just scanning all the IPs, attacking all the IPs, just trying to get access. And those are businesses. So there is just people who make money by hacking your server sites, etc., gathering the data together and giving it to data brokers. Data brokers take this data and sell your access to your server for $10, and I mean root access. And someone else buys it and then uses it as part of their own botnet to run a DDoS attack or to send spam or to distribute malware, stuff like that. So it's multiple businesses, but if you want to figure out how much it worth for the hacker to have access to your server, that's $2 to $10. That's how much they will get on the open market for full access to your server.
Wow. That's a little bit terrifying. And so you're talking to hosting companies.
Yeah.
What types of attacks do they tend to see these days?
Well, I can.
Yeah, Ashley.
I was going to say, yeah,
Yeah.
we get to see thousands of attacks every week.
Okay.
And some of our large hosting customers, they have tens of thousands of customers themselves. And take any one of those hosting providers, as they've grown their customer base, you can just look through the attacks, and by often looking at the victim IP, you can figure out why that attack was launched. It could be a controversial news site that's being attacked for some political disagreement or ideology. It could be a new game hoster that's launched, and he's being attacked competitively, potentially by other game hosters from far as a gambling site. It could be gamers themselves attacking each other because they're playing. Or it could be a corporation that's done something controversial and drawn the ire of the online audience, and somebody has paid to attack them. So in for one hoster, during just 1 week, you will see examples of all of those and more motivations for the attacks. Wow. And any one of those attacks could be using different set of vectors depending on which, booter or attack site they chose to use to launch the attack.
It's quite interesting at scale for the for the infrastructure providers. I don't know how many in the audience are doing unmanaged or managed bare metal, right? But we don't often know, right? We have no clue why these people are getting attacked, right? All we're seeing is bits and bytes moving from point A to point B, right? And we're relying on partners, like a Link 11 or a Corero to help try to understand why these attacks are doing it. But what we are, trying to help provide our customers is that first line of defense, right? Just that very bare bones first line of defense. Make sure you can stay online long enough to get to, get an advertisement, re-advertisement done to a paid DDoS protection provider or something like that. But yeah, the motivation isn't really well known to us, right? But we still have to deal with it. We still have to build it into our business models. We still have to account for it effectively, right? So it has a cost, right? At large scale, it has a cost to some extent. To a small hosting company, it can have an extreme cost if they don't do something about it, right? Yeah.
Okay, great.
There is a few more. So this is if you're looking just at the DDoS side of the attacks, but there is basically DDoS sometimes is just people don't like you, and because it's so cheap to DDoS someone, that's why they're attacking you. But if you look at the rest of the attacks that are going on, like brute forcing or when people penetrate, etc., it's all about money. So typically, if it's a big e-commerce site, they're hacking you to steal the credit cards. You all probably heard about the ransomware from the hospitals. They're there for the money. They will encrypt your files, interrupt your networks, do whatever it is to make sure that you pay them to go away. And of course, we have NSA, we have state-sponsored attacks, we have cyber terrorism. What is interesting about attacks is that we don't see them, meaning that quite often the attack goes on for years because before someone notices that there is an attack. Most attacks are not discovered for years after they happened.
Wow.
And that's scary.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, you could definitely say that the same as we all do, so we do business as a service, what they are doing is hacking as a service. So if you go to the darknet and take a look on it, you see there's DDoS as a service, there's hacking as a service, you get fraud identifiers as a service and stuff like that. So cybercrime is nowadays, it's a big business. I mean, it's illegal for sure, but it's a big business for them people. I mean, they can do it from all over the world, and they are really talented in doing it. So, and for them, it's a business. They get paid for it.
Yep.
And if I understand what you're telling me is it's very distinctly possible that I'm hacked already and I'm just an asset in waiting.
I heard it on the radio actually about 4 weeks ago. So when they asked penetration testers, have you ever met a target that you couldn't penetrate? And they kind of said, no, we were always able to get into the target. Of course, they have to say it. It's like if they say that, oh, I couldn't penetrate it, it's like they're talking about impotence. But anyway, what was more interesting is that then they were asking how often did you get detected? And then 60% of the time, they were never detected. They were able to get into the system always, and most of the time they were not detected, and they recommended penetration testers, not black hat guys. They told the companies that they should invest more not into protection, but into detection, because it's always possible, if the motivation is big enough, it's always possible to get in, but it's very hard to stay undetectable when you're already inside the network and trying to do something.
And Jens and I were just kind of saying, we definitely question whether or not it's potentially even more, right, than that, right? But what I was going to say was, what we're seeing with our enterprise customers is that the larger, more mature businesses are starting that have a lot to lose. The ones that are, your credit card processing companies and things like that. They've invested significantly since, effectively card systems hack in 2004 forward, right? And what we're seeing the largest risk right now is the fast scaling new businesses, the ones that are going from 0 to 100 million monthly average users in a year and a half, 2 years. They've not been focusing on security. They've been focusing on scale and building their business and making their application better for their consumer.
So that is a very good segue for us, because you've got these companies who haven't been focusing on those things. And maybe some companies in this room have not been focusing enough on these things, but it's obvious that we've got an issue here, and some of it's very terrifying. The first word in our title is avoiding. And so let's start by focusing our attention on preventative measures and things that hosting providers should be doing to avoid these things before they happen.
Well, so I mean, for most hosting companies, one of the most important things is reliability. So they have to be always up. They have to be always uptime. So if we're hosting companies, and unfortunately, I guess some of us here in the room knows that feeling when the network is down or when the data center is down. So it's really a very, very bad feeling. So, and network companies and hosting companies have to be very, very careful about their uptime, because if their uptime is too bad, they lose totally their trust, they destroy their brand, and they have huge problems into the market. So one important thing, if we talk about hacking and attacks and DDoS attacks, so one important thing is always keeping your data center uptime. So, and if you look about new studies from Emerson and Ponemon Institution, you see, for example, the reasons for data center outages. And these were, in 2010, only 2% of all data center outages were caused by cybercrime. But in 2016, it was 22% of all data center outages was caused by cybercrime. It's not longer UPS failure and air condition failure and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It's really about cybercrime. And if you're thinking about cloud computing, it's getting worse and worse.
Interesting. So a lot of cost is lost there. Is it expensive to address this problem before it happens?
Well, one of the things that I think this community will appreciate is it's becoming free. Yeah. Right? Because while in the past it was an infrastructure cost, a price you had to pay to protect your infrastructure, the customers, their end users now are aware that DDoS protection is something they should have, and they're willing to pay for it. And many of our customers buy the equipment from providers like ours. They get the infrastructure protection for free, and then they sell DDoS protection as a service to their hosted customers or their enterprise customers, and it's actually a a margin-generating operation now. So if with careful development, you can become a security service provider as well as a hosting provider, as well as a backup provider, et cetera, to your customer base.
Yeah. But it takes scale, right? Actually, I think that there's an amount of scale that you have to be at before you can make those investments in monetizing security.
You're right, it used to be, but now even vendors like Corero are offering our protection, our equipment as a service. Yeah. So you don't have to pay up front. You can pay as you go, as you grow.
Sure. So how does it really work?
You mean
how come I'm not paying? So I'm not paying for the traffic that comes in to you which you scrub.
So
And
previously, it would be an operating cost for the hosting provider. They'd have to buy the DDoS protection equipment, install it, pay for it themselves, install it, and then it would be just like they buy their routers or their transit connect.
okay.
But now they can monetize the DDoS equipment and protection by selling it as an uplift to their customers, and they click a box and pay an extra 10% or 20% a month to have DDoS protected websites.
But it still takes a scale, because that means that this provider has to have like 100 gigabit pipe.
Well, many of the providers have like 10, 20, 30 gigabits.
Many do, but it takes scale.
I think that's the issue, and for a lot of the people here, they're still, they've come to this forum to learn about starting their businesses. They may have 4, 5, 6, 10 bare metal servers, and that's it. That's all they have.
They might have 20 gigabit pipe, but it's for their whole business, and
Right.
probably 10 of them is already used.
Right.
So
And
it
so
does take scale, I would say.
I think that was
Well, as somebody who practices the business every day, I can assure you it doesn't, just because the inbound bandwidth is usually much smaller, right? And the size of the attacks is dependent on the size of their business. You don't
That is
the
true.
guy you were just saying who's just getting started isn't getting hit with a 500 gig attack, right?
I hope
That's
so.
more-
I would hope so.
That's more like a top 10 provider. So
But we-
there is real scale and real margin opportunity.
we do see, you're right, especially at the very, very ends of the spectrum, right? You're never going to get the brand new small business that's, not never, but unlikely you get a brand new small business that's hit with a 500 gig attack.
Well, also what I'll help you with, because it's important, I think, if you're a small business and one of your customers gets hit with a 200 gigabit attack, you're never going to be able to afford to protect him. You will simply black hole him, right? Because the cost of protecting him would be 100 times
Yeah,
what he pays you.
That's
right?
exactly what I was asking.
So,
I
so,
just couldn't
so it works
make my
very
brain.
nicely for the community.
Of course.
Yeah, but
So we're talking about there a model where somebody is going to basically have security systems added on top of, rather than, for instance, a web hosting provider saying, I just want to make sure that my entire network and all the services that I provide are de facto as secure as they possibly can
Yeah.
be. So when we're talking about things that you should do sort of ecosystem-wide, are there suggestions that you have for the broad ecosystem?
It takes planning. I think that's the biggest thing that I see that lacks in the community today, is that they're not planning for any of these types of attacks to occur, right? They're potentially leveraging things that are built in, right? Maybe you were using one of Igor's tool sets with cPanel or something like that, but you did it because he made it easy for you. You checked a box, but then you don't think about the how you're going to protect your email system from some type of different attack, or how you're going to protect yourself against DDoSes, and what your plan is going to be, right? What is your provider giving you, right? Most of the small businesses here leverage a large data center infrastructure provider, right? Pick one, right? Plus Server, IBM, us, somebody, right? They're, the number of guys that buy servers that don't even ask us, well, what can you give me to help me, protect my business against these types of attacks? They don't even think about it until it happens. And then they're really desperate to find out how they can get help.
Yeah, and I think also it also depends on the end customer, because some end customers, they buy 1 or 2, 3 servers, and they expect service provider to totally handle it. And then you have people who have cages and cages of servers, and they really don't. They have their own plan on how to handle it, and maybe they do appreciate the disaster recovery service or DDoS protection service that a big provider can provide to them. And it's very important to be able to do that. And then you have this in the middle guys who have maybe 15 servers, 20 servers, but they are yet to have the security expertise where managed providers like PhoenixNAP can play a crucial role by helping them, guiding them on what's needed. Because there is always this uptake. You start small, you don't have, you do your business, you concentrate, you focus on what you're doing, and you don't have money for security. I know it's stupid, but you don't have money for the security. And then you get bigger, 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 and you become bigger and bigger problem. And some people realize in advance that they need to prepare, and some people realize too late that you need to prepare. And I think it's a role of a service provider to make sure that as their customers grow, they, especially if it's a managed customer, they go through the security plans, disaster recovery plans, DDoS protection plans with that customer.
Christian, can I ask Jens a question? How many of your customers, Jens, come to you having never suffered any type of issue, and they just want to be protected in case?
Well, I think, especially for Link 11, we have to say we are protecting a lot of enterprise companies, and for sure you can imagine that such companies like global leading banks, financial institutions, healthcare, and stuff like that, they really take preventive security, because if they hacked, and this is something I want to add from the last question, Christian, I would say, well, it's not a question, is it expensive to protect? It's the question, is it expensive to be hacked?
Yeah, sure.
So, and that's the point. I mean, for some organizations, it's critical, it's absolutely critical that they don't be hacked or that they don't have any downtime or something like that. I mean, it's like for financial institutions, for example, but also for hosting companies. Imagine if you have an hosting companies and it's offline for 5, 6, 8 hours, up to a day or 2 days. I mean, what do you think about what your customers thinking of you? I mean, after such an outage, you nearly can close your business.
I definitely see your point, but I want to dig down into what William was bringing up, because let's say that you are a provider that has not experienced debilitating attacks, but thinks that you probably might. The thing is, you've got an existing customer base. Bringing on a number of different services is going to add cost. Do many go ahead and bite that bullet before before getting attacked? And actually, I'm going to make this a two-part question, but I'm throwing them both out there at the beginning. Generally, people will do that if they see some marketing benefit in here. But the thing that always struck me as strange there is, I feel like maybe you're painting a target on your back if you say, hey, you know, we're super secure, we added all these resources, come sign up for us now.
Well, Christian, I think it's a different point of view. I mean, if you think about, when do you buy an UPS system? When you had the power outage or before? When do you buy the generator, genset, to get uninterrupted power? Before the power outage or after? When do you buy the fire detection system? When it burns or before? So, and it's just the thing of awareness, and this is something what we see, that the awareness in the market is getting higher and higher, because that makes me also scary, because a lot of people have a huge visibility, but they don't act because they don't know about that there are so serious threats about it.
I like his analogy, and let me compound on it a little bit. If you're a data center or a large institution, then you do all those things before you do. But I mean, at least in the US, I'm sure, you know, obviously here in Germany as well, how many businesses that are of significant size, I'd say $10, $20 million plus businesses, have everything in their office, you know, in the server room with no fire suppression, and they're just going on about their day, right? Everything's fine. It's still very commonplace, right? I mean, I was looking at the IDC study. It was like still something like 52% of all what would be considered enterprise workloads exist in you know, call it tier 3 plus type facilities, right? They exist in on-prem closets and data rooms and, you know, regional offices all over the globe and this place and that place. And many of them don't have, you know, maybe they have fire suppression so they don't lose everything, but they don't have generators in case the outage happens, right?
Regarding generators, I heard so many stories where they have the second generator, but they never tested it, or they forgot to test it, or they did test it, but it was a long time ago, and it does switch over, but it doesn't work. So, yes, you should have, but a lot of people still don't.
Well, we started this conversation by saying the threats are worse now than they were before. And so maybe, I'm just positing this is a possibility, that, you know, you had a list of requirements when you were building a web hosting company 10 years ago, and you checked the box on UPS, you checked the box on generator, and those boxes didn't need to be checked then, they do now. Does that seem like it's something that resonates with people?
Well, I was going to say, though, I think there is a difference in the hosting world to the enterprise world. Most of our customers are being attacked every day. This is not something they buy just in case or as a preventative measure. Right. They need the protection. Otherwise, they're going to suffer service degradation, or have bunches of unhappy customers. And it's not just the victim, the single IP that drew the particular attack. It's everybody else who's in that rack or downstream of that switch, or was expecting low latency for their business interactions as opposed to their upstream links being, occupied. So there is a difference between an enterprise buying an insurance policy with DDoS protection and a hosting provider who's buying it because they observe, anomalous traffic issues every day, and they need to stop them cold. Otherwise, it will impact the service that they provide to their customers. So the hosting provider space is different from the communications provider, the network provider, or the colo space.
William, do you see the same? Because I can totally see why DDoS protection company would see all of their customers under DDoS, because if you're not under DDoS, you just don't pay for it. But do you see the same with your bigger customer? Are all of them constantly under attacks?
Yeah, so our largest hosters, right, specifically, right, are always under attack, right? Can't use names, but some of the largest hosters in the web, data, bare metal, all the components of the hosting community are our customers, and they are seriously under attack every single day for the same reasons that we were talking about on this panel, right? They've got end users that are doing something, and they don't know what's happening.
Well, the provider's not under attack.
No.
The IPs they host are the ones under attack.
They have huge amounts of customers. What about your direct enterprise
Right,
customers? How about
the
their
enterprise customers are not, unless you have something that's high vis today, right? If you're a large e-commerce website, you're under a consistent barrage of not just DDoS, but hacking attempts,
Hacking,
everything,
not-
right? But no, I mean, if you're a steel manufacturer, right, and you've got a public website to do some basic business interactions, and the rest of your stuff's in warehouses and things like that, are they getting hacked or attempting? Yes, it happens. It happens for sure. Is it a constant barrage every day, and they're got cybersecurity experts sitting there thwarting attacks or paying for services to help thwart attacks? No, right? Well, I will say this: no one thinks it will happen until it happens to them, right?
I agree to that.
And in 2010, when we were building our business, right, we'd got to significant size, well over 5,000 servers, and we hadn't put enough time and effort into these problems, right? Specifically DDoSes, right? And to your point, Ashley, we started to see massive infrastructure disruption from these attacks, right? And it was painful, right? I'm sharing the story for the people in the audience that are seeing their business grow every day, right? Trust me, it's much easier to start slowly and consistently planning and layering on security, whether it's paying for a DDoS protection kind of service, right? A pay-as-you-go service, whether it's augmenting your top-of-rack switches from 10 to 20 gigs so that they can handle a little bit more, whatever that is, you have to make those consistent investments thinking about security and potential disruption so that you don't have those issues. It causes brand damage. It causes all kinds of unhappy customers, right? And as a hoster, one of the worst things that could ever happen to you is for the community to think that your network sucks.
So I appreciate you telling that story. That's fantastic. But while we're focusing on that, on avoiding, before we get into response mitigation and things like that, I'd like to zero in on the parts of that type of preventative work that you were suggesting that might not include buying services. Let's see if we can give the audience some suggestions of things that they should be doing that aren't buying a product and adding cost. I'm hearing, for instance, about the benefits of implementing response policy zone, RPZ, as a possible thing. I don't know whether that is useful at all for this, or any suggestions you might have.
My opinion, buy services, be prepared to launch them when you need them, but have them ready at the moment notice. Because what will happen is that one of your customers will get a DDoS attack, and all your customers will suffer. So make sure. But to be honest, I'm pretty sure everyone here have some plan, because everyone here was already under DDoS. So you either null route all the traffic or have a way to handle it.
There are some things that I think I could recommend for the small hoster, right? The guy that's coming in with a few servers. Talk to your provider, right? Ask them basic questions like, hey, can you make sure, I'm going to buy 5 servers. Can you make sure that as many of them as possible are not in the same rack together, right? Maybe it's accepting a little bit lower margin and spreading your customer workloads out a little further, right? Not taking that one server to the point it breaks just to maximize, margin. Maybe add that second server, add that 10th server, whatever it is, to try to spread that workload out a little bit more. You can minimize your risk, right? Talk to your provider and ask them what they're doing to help you, right? Not just what you would have to pay for, but what are you doing to help me as built into my service, right? And then, I think finally, go towards what Igor said, right? Just plan on it happening, right? It's gonna happen. Something's gonna happen eventually. Plan for some of it at least, and find solutions.
I really like about subnets, different racks. That really makes sense. Don't keep all your eggs in one basket.
Good.
The same thing's true for your upstream providers too. So different transit providers will source different levels of the attack. I've often seen attacks coming in where one transit provider link is saturated and a different transit provider, because they're operating different policies, might just be humming at 20%. So you maintain access. Be careful who you host. If you have that selectivity, there are certain types of companies that will bring a storm of DDoS into your data center because they're doing things that will attract attacks. So that's also something you can proactively do, or at least openly go into that, knowing that you're engaging in a battle, not yourself, but the customers you're hosting are going to draw attacks. And people make that choice because sometimes they pay a large monthly service fee, to use your facilities. So then you get into the customer retention issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was a huge battle for us, right? We were at one point, we're definitely one of the largest Minecraft hosters out there, and it was also our #1 problem child, right? And we had to make decisions every day. Do we want this type of business? And if you can, at the time when we were a young company, you couldn't make that selection, right? You took whatever money you could get, right? As we got bigger, right, we were able to be more selective and say, well, maybe we don't want that type of customer.
So
right?
did you get rid of Minecraft hosting?
Well, it kind of got rid of itself, but yes, I mean, unless we did set thresholds to say, look, unless you're going to be of this size for us, right, then we're not going to take the single server Minecraft hoster. Yeah.
So what William says, especially in the gaming area, it's a huge problem of DDoS. I mean, there are very, very lot of attacks, but I mean, the point is, and I think the same also what William says is, if you choose the customers, if you select the customers, I mean, DDoS, it started at the beginning. I mean, attacks getting more and more over years, and at one point you have to take care about it, independent which customers you have, because it could happen every customer. I mean, look the newspaper about the customers that are hit by DDoS. I mean, it's PayPal, it's MasterCard, it's Lloyd Bank. You don't want to serve these customers, really?
Right, no, that's it.
I think they would make an exception for those.
Okay, so I think that advice is really useful to people. But I respect how you started out saying no, buy these services. So my next question is, how do you do a needs assessment on yourself, independent of being under attack, to figure out what it is you need from service providers?
A needs assessment for
your own security needs, for your network, to go out there and find the right providers, maybe some of your companies.
I think it's become a logical extension of, I mean, we were talking about, transit provider diversity, rack diversity, look at the kind of customers you're hosting or charging. And security is just an extension of that. So the same kind of sensible analysis you did, do I have enough links, enough diversity of providers? The same thing's true about, do I have an answer for DDoS? Day one, it might just be to abandon that customer with a null route or a black hole whenever it happens, but you need to do it quickly, because if it takes you 10 minutes to figure out what's going on, for 10 minutes you've had a lot of collateral damage in your hosted. So, but the same for for the site security too, or the hacking examples, use the same kind of sensible approach that you've used for
I
others?
mentioned the top of rack augmentation, right? So for us, just doing a little bit of like data introspection and say, okay, well, what's the average size of an attack we see, right? Call it, 15 gigs or something like that, right? Oh, wow. Every top of rack switch is uplinked with one or, redundant 10 gig uplinks. It's going to, 15 plus whatever's already happening on that switch, right? And they're going down, easy enough, right? It's how how inexpensive is it today to augment basic, to add 2 more or 4 more 10 gig uplinks, right? It's at scale, it's not that expensive comparatively, right? And you can isolate your problem at that point, right? Then that server's still gonna go offline, but now the collateral damage is somewhat subdued, right?
Yeah.
Finding in solutions to layer on top so that, you can survive past that is up to your business interest, right? We've made the decision not to monetize DDoS protection as a business for various reasons. We believe that our partners can do it better, right? I think that's one thing. We focus all of our money on providing enough scale to help prevent all but the largest from affecting anyone. And then just making it a value add, right? I think that's it, right? We leave that margin up to somebody else and making it what we do, which is significant, but maybe not as much as the guys here on stage will do for you. We do for free.
That's impressive. That's great.
Can I add? I would actually recommend people to start with 2 things. One is disaster recovery plan, and the other one is business plan. So first, go back to your disaster recovery plan and just think about it. What will I do if I will have a crippling DDoS attack against me? What I will do if I will have a hack against me that cripples my business? What is my plan? And that will give you some perspective first. And then go and think, what will I do if it happens only to my customer? And that part is a business plan part. Do I want to make money out of it? Is it my marketing differentiator, or do I just want to get rid of this customer or make customers swim on their own? And it really is about business. What kind of business are you in? Are you managed hosting provider? Are you selling cheapest possible cloud servers? Are you somewhere in between? And that will dictate the solutions and plans you will have.
I think that that's a perfect segue to what I'd like to talk about next, because even if providers took all the advice that you've given up until this point, eventually shit happens, and you're in crisis, right? You talked about having a plan. Let's see if we can get some advice to companies about what it is they should be thinking about or have prepared when disaster has hit.
Well, it's a combination. It's a combination of technical things you have to do, and it's also a combination, depending on what type of attack it was. It's about marketing and public relationship you have to do, because what we have seen in the past is the worst you can do is trying to don't talk about the problems and try to, well, just don't talk about it and throw it away, something like that. So if you communicate about things, we see that the customers especially are accepting it more and more, and it's more okay for the customers if you really be honest and communicate about the things.
Yeah.
I think there is a higher level awareness for a lot of you in the audience. You've jumped around, right? We know, we see it, right? You've been with, I'm not going to name names. So you've been with provider A and provider B and provider C and provider D, and then what you come to realize is that everyone has problems. Nothing's perfect, right? And what you're trying to do is find the best mix of what the provider's doing to help you build your business, and what you're doing yourself in terms of planning for the worst to occur. Disaster recovery plans for, depending on what's happening, are extremely important, right? DDoS is very difficult because if you come up somewhere else, you're just going to get hit again and you're offline again, right? But hacking is much easier to protect yourself against in terms of reliable backups, testing backups, failover scenarios, all kinds of things.
Well, even if with DDoS, if it's a company, not with hosting provider, it's difficult. You have range of IPs, but if it's an enterprise, they can quickly have a plan to quickly switch the IP and go through one of the DDoS vendors.
Sure. Yeah.
They have this option, and hosting provider has an option of no route the IP. They just have to test it in advance so that they don't have 6 hours window when they are, oh, it's not working or it's not helping or what exactly am I no routing, etc.
Well, what our customers benefit from is our SOC, which is fighting DDoS attacks all the time. So it might be your first crisis, but our guys have seen it 100 times and have helped companies through those situations. So if you do sign up for a DDoS protection solution, you want to make sure that they have a 7x24 DDoS SOC that's staffed by experts who do this as a profession, so that they can answer your questions and give you the advice that you need to survive the incident. You don't want to be discovering it for the first time when it happens to you.
So we're getting close to the end of our time, and I really want to be able to end with our top advice on how to avoid network interruptions, hacking, and DDoS attacks, which is the title here. So I'm going to ask you guys to give the last advice to the audience. We're going to do it in 2 rounds. I want to go down the road. I want to go down the path twice. The first time we're going to scare them, and then we're going to enlighten them. And so I've got rapid-fire questions. We're going to start out by me asking you, what is the scariest thing that keeps you up at night these days?
The customer database being stolen.
That's good.
Makes it. For me, it's the rise in the botnets, like with IoT. They could just do an order of magnitude jump in the size of potential attacks. And that would impact the internet, not just an individual provider.
Yeah.
That a lot of people with a huge responsibility don't take the threat serious.
A whole facility outage would be
Sure.
a problem.
Sure.
We also own one of the largest credit card processors in the world. 100 million credit cards being gone.
Sure. And finally, what is your top advice about what can be done about them, and what can be done about avoiding network interruptions, hacking, and DDoS attacks?
Oh, I get it easy. Be prepared. That's it.
Yes.
Plan it in advance.
Yeah, same here. From my specialty, DDoS, then you should have a DDoS plan and technology in your solution.
Yeah, inform you about the threats, inform you about the plans, and just be prepared.
Educate your end users, right? Talk to them, educate them, help them, tell them what you're doing for them, etc.
And there you have it, everybody. We've answered the questions. We hope that you'll heed this advice and go out there into the world and grow your businesses. I'm sorry we didn't get much of a chance to use the catch box. I would have loved to have thrown this out and got some questions from the audience. But you should be able to find these thought leaders around WHD and stop them and talk with them some more. Thank you very much for your time, and thanks to the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.